I'm actually going to call up one of the presidents from the Kerrisdale Community Center to speak.
Thank you, Jesse. I'm Robert Lockhart, Vice President of Kerrisdale Community Center Association. And I think we owe ourselves a great big cheer, because 3 weeks ago, Park Board and City Council wouldn't talk about this issue in public. In fact, for a year, we and members of associations and societies have been pummeled by comments from city staff that this is a non-negotiable deal, we're going to take over control, and we are taking all the revenue. Well, lo and behold, we held public meetings on January 29th in Kerrisdale and Killarney, and altogether over 3 meetings, more than 1,000 people came out. Guess what? They noticed. And you're here tonight, they're going to notice. So we have made a great step forward. We brought this issue out into the public. We're making citizens across the city aware that the Parks Board is trying to put the community center associations out of business. They're trying to take control. They want all the revenue because the city is revenue deficient. The Parks Board is revenue deficient. The community centers have money. And guess what? We're using that money. We're managing that money. If you look at the February the 4th slide presentation on page 9, it listed the contributions of capital revenue, capital expenditures of community centers. There were 5 listed on that chart of a few $100,000, $20,000. One of them was 0. And guess what? Kerrisdale wasn't on the list. From the period 2002 to 2011, Kerrisdale got no credit for capital expenditures. Interesting, because we spent $1.25 million over that 10-year period on capital expenditures in our community center. And if I go back 1 year to 2001, I go forward 1 year to 2012, the total over that 12-year period is $1.7 million. They credited all 21 community centers with $2 million of expenditure in capital funding. How much did the other 20 centers spend? If you tallied it up, I bet it was a lot more than $2 million. We have been the victim of strong-arm tactics. It happened for a year up until January 29th when they were forced to come out in the open. It didn't stop. On February the 4th, a meeting was dragged out until 3:30 in the morning. I left at 1:30, and I had another hour and a half to wait before I would have spoken. And I couldn't take it. I left. It was a totally disrespectful scenario. And then Councillor Adrian Carr comes forward with a motion to look at the capital impact on City Council, and guess what? The strong-arm tactics continued. They tried to shut her down. They don't want a motion going to Council to say what's going to be the financial impact of this change on the city budget. It's not going to be 0. I, in fact, wrote to Mr. Bromley saying, we might like to talk to you about this if you can give us examples of how you can manage community center funds better than we're doing it. No response. I think the gist of that question was being asked on Monday night, February the 4th. No response. They have no answer as to how they can do a better job of managing the money that is generated in community centers, controlled by community center associations, and spent by community center associations. And in Kerrisdale over 10 years, it was $1.25 million that they couldn't see. We are not against access. We are not against FlexiPass or equitable contact with visits to our association facilities, to our community centers. In fact, we have a budget of $3,000 in Kerrisdale a year to subsidize low-income people coming into our community center if they wish to. I don't think there's a community center across the city that would reject somebody who didn't have the money to pay for a program. In fact, I know there isn't. It isn't a question of think. I know there isn't. But there's a reality that comes along with this too, and that is community centers are managed by societies. Societies are responsible to the province of British Columbia, and as the province of British Columbia mandates that we have memberships. In other words, each of the 21 societies has to have a membership. We need the memberships to exist. That is not to say we are not open and willing to accept people from another center who has a valid membership coming to our center. But we would at least like to talk to Parks Board about this question, not have it jammed down our throats. We have been functioning since 1979 with a contract. It's a perfectly valid existing contract. And normally when you go into negotiations, you start with what you have on the table. You don't start with a whole bunch of non-negotiable demands and comments in community center board meetings saying, we don't need you, quote Mr. Bromley, documented in the minutes of community center at Killarney. We have an existing contract. We would like to continue with that negotiation based on that contract and modify it as needed in order to accept low-income access and flexibility. Finally, one final point, a point of hypocrisy. In October, when Mr. Bromley came to the association president's group and said, here is a plan, we take control of all the money, we want to control all of the programming. Within days of that, the mayor announced the existence of a task force on engagement in city governance. He didn't think there was enough community engagement in city governance, and yet there's 400 plus volunteers on boards and directors across the city, completely and totally engaged on local city governance, and it's not good enough. What does he want? They want the money that we are generating and we're turning back into our community centers. Jesse's standing here. Thank you for giving me the time to talk. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.